Hey everybody, welcome to Xirtus's exciting adventure on, we're doing a conversation really about Boinc. Have you guys ever heard of Boinc? Boinc is one of the most interesting pre-crypto node networks that I've ever seen. When I was a kid, we used to have computers that had this thing called the internet. I know that it's an outdated concept, but you connect them together and you could actually communicate from one machine to another machine. You could actually take a calculation and you could array it amongst a number of machines to distribute the task. And this was before there was incentivization for money. They were like, hey, SETI, maybe there's some aliens out there. That was kind of how I heard about SETI at home, and it led to Boinc. But apparently there's more. John, good to meet you. Tell us about yourself and Boinc.
Morning. Yeah. I am, and apologies for not having a camera. I'm used to podcasts, so no visual setup here.
We're gonna put a cartoon over you. You're gonna be a duck now.
Ooh, do it. I do like a good mallard now and again. I run a small community within the Boinc infrastructure, and we'll get into what Boinc is on a technical level at some point. But what we do is basically talk about all the science that and different distributed computing tasks that Boinc itself does. Boinc stands for the Berkeley Open Infrastructure for Networked Computing. And you mentioned SETI at home, which is really a great way to introduce it because that's where it started in the late 90s. It's one of the first distributed computing projects, or one of the early ones.
In 1997.
Right. Yeah. Oh my God. So what they did back then, what these guys did is in an effort to popularize science like the Apollo projects did, like to get people excited about science, they said, hey, SETI, aliens, let's look for them. So the way they wanted to do this is by pointing a giant telescope up in the sky, collecting a bunch of information, a bunch of data, and then analyzing it and looking for sort of blips in the data that might be aliens. A lot of it is like pulsars or other natural phenomenon, but hey, maybe we'll find aliens. And the way they would analyze this data is they would break it into little chunks and send it out to volunteers' computers around the world. And that each volunteer's computer would essentially solve a chunk of the data and send it back to the SETI guys, who would then say, hey, aliens, or, not aliens, was more often the case. In fact, always the case.
It's undocumented workers is the modern term, but yes.
Yeah, so they did that, and it was a great success. They got hundreds of thousands of people on the first day or two, and then upwards of millions of people. As the project progressed, they had this really beautiful visualization as a screensaver. A lot of people might remember for when the work was getting done. And it just turns out it worked really, really well. So a lot of other projects, a lot of other institutions, companies, and just regular people decided to use this infrastructure, the Boinc infrastructure, to start their own projects. So at this point, there's 30 some odd different Boinc projects running, from curing cancer or trying to fight cancer to fighting climate change to doing prime numbers and different mathematical conjectures. So there's some cryptography stuff. There was one that decrypted the Enigma machine messages from World War II. That was really fun. So there's just an unlimited, basically, if you can take a computing task or a computing project and break it up into little chunks, you can use Boinc, and that's what people have been doing since, and it's still going strong, man. I was surprised too that it still exists.
That's an interesting way to break it down, actually, is that if you can break it down, then it's been broken down into Boinc. And so, I mean, how many things can be broken down, and where are the limits on that? I mean, it'd be great if we could take, let's say something takes 1 million years to do. If we have 1 million machines that run for a year, shouldn't we be able to do 1 million years worth of work in an array of 1 year on 1 million machines parallel? Does that make sense, or is there an order of operations problem with Boinc that we need to consider?
No, that's absolutely it. I mean, there's even more to it too. We just talked about, I do a Boinc podcast, and we just talked about sensor projects. You could have There's an earthquake sensor project where people hook up their phones, and if they shake, there's an earthquake. And from all over the world, you're sensing earthquakes or radioactivity or stuff like that. But for an example of the scale of this stuff, there's a lot of biology projects or medical projects. And the way these projects work is they compute what's called folding proteins, where you just reposition a protein until it fits the position you're looking for. And once you get the position you're looking for, you can then take that into the lab and do an actual experiment with it. This is fairly new, relatively new. The way they used to have to do it is they would go into a lab and just, trial and error thousands of times until they got the medicine they're looking for. And that just didn't work really well. Now you can do that trial and error hundreds of millions of times in like a month. So what used to take like 20 years, you can now do in a month. And it uses volunteers, computers from all over the world to do it. So people are getting involved with the science. They're learning about stuff. They're interacting with universities, which are largely, exclusive. Now they're bringing people in to do their science with them. So like, come for the ride, come for the journey. It's really exciting to see. Uh-oh, I lost you.
Sorry, I had the mute. I muted myself for a second. That's exciting. I had for a long time, I think it was 2002, I built a Boinc network in my 5th grade BIOS computer server system because I needed to have.
Kidding.
I had to have an Eagle Scout 250-hour project that contributed to a lot of people. And I think at the time, uploading data, I was pretty convinced would help that circumstance. And I was really, happy with the way Boinc was designed because it allowed you to parallel processes, but it wasn't quite. I got in a lot of trouble also because I was in 5th grade and I did it in the 6th grade computer room. And then when they found out that I installed BIOS on their computers, they were upset. But BIOS is cool, and they turned it into Haiku, and hooray. But my question is, does this help us? Now we have blockchain, we have BitTorrent, we have all these things. Why am I so excited to get back into Boinc? Why is it so useful still? What's up with this military grade Boinc technology?
It is kind of military grade when you think about it. This stuff is the same thing as a blockchain in a sense. If you think about a blockchain as a giant distributed computer, all hashing a ledger, trying to verify all these transactions and everything, that is what Boinc does. Just Boinc doesn't hash a ledger, and it doesn't have that incentive mechanism to it. So you can apply that massive computing power to thousands of other things and probably tie blockchain and Boinc technology together at some point. People have been attempting this already. There's a cryptocurrency called Gridcoin I also work with. This is a nonprofit called Leyline that's sort of experimenting with it. There have been several other cryptocurrencies that work with massive distributed computing. But it's more, Boinc itself is focused on solving quote unquote real world problems, finding new physics, finding cures for diseases, finding more efficient solar panels, that sort of stuff. Not that I don't think securing a ledger is a real world problem. I love blockchain, but the scientists here are still new to the tech. So it's the exciting part with Boinc and blockchain is where it might go in the future as blockchain becomes more mainstream and all these people have been doing distributed computing since the late 90s sort of meet at some point. Like, what can we do with this marriage?
So we've got this idea now, I guess we could call it distributed computing, like you just said. It's you taking a calculation, like we want to know what, 2 plus blah, 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 plus 2 equals this huge formula. I could do my part, you could do your part, we could, and there's order of operations. Some of these things need to be scheduled. Some of these things cannot be tardy. Some of these things have to be on time. Some of these things can be done earlier. Some of these can have higher priorities. Does Boinc really like build that system? Is that it's kind of like an exchange, right? But like, is there scheduling? What happens when an order is out of operations?
More on the techie side, like how the actual projects work. So there is the Boinc scheduler, and you can set up your projects to run a specific way if you want. But if we want to get into the really techie stuff, I'm not the guy to ask for that, because I'm more of what this tech can do for getting people into the scientific system and all that stuff. But I do know there are the tech does allow for the scientist or the researcher or even just the person with a laptop in their closet, which is a really exciting part about Boinc, the permissionless aspect. It allows for these people to set up the tasks in such a way, or the project in such a way, that they can accept the first batch of results, then build a new application on top of those results, send out new tasks to get those done, and then accept the results from that, and then sort of build in that order of operation. Or you could have continuously running simulations. There's one called climateprediction.net, which just tries to simulate the climate. It's straightforward. And that doesn't really need point A, point B, point C. It's just continuously running. So there's lots of different ways to set it up. But in terms of the exact technicals of how it does it, I have no idea, man. This stuff is super
This is
super
well, that's
way over my head.
one of the craziest things about Boinc is so heady. I mean, it really is like 20, 30 years worth of technology, probably more actually. That's like the stuff that's built up behind it to make Boinc happen. There's a number of different usages, though. There's so many different kinds of people that are using it, and that it can be used. Like some of the applications you've mentioned, like in medicine or in science. But it seems like blockchain's shown that there can be incentivization, because there used to be this idea that like we don't know how to get people to distribute computing. What if they find aliens? We'll give them a reward. SETI was a good. That's incentivization. That's gamification. We're now hitting a point where Boinc might actually deserve to be tokenized. Do you think that there's a place for tokens in Boinc's future, or is that just a ready fork?
I personally think it is. That's why I work with Gridcoin, which does exactly what you're saying. So Boinc has this gamified system within it where it's really complicated, but essentially you get points for contributing to Boinc projects. And what Gridcoin does is it takes those points and through economics and math translates it into a cryptocurrency called Gridcoin, and then distributes it to people who contribute to these projects. And it's worked really well. It incentivizes people to go out, buy new hardware, hook up old hardware, which is really important. Like instead of throwing out an old phone, just hooking it up to Boinc until it dies, and then you recycle it. Like you don't just need to waste all this these resources that are in these processors. So I hope it is in the future, and that's why I work with Gridcoin, who's trying to do this stuff. But who knows, man? Who knows where it's going to go? Leyline is another nonprofit I talked about. They're doing they're sort of talking about marrying Boinc and cryptocurrency along with the other stuff, because cryptocurrency can incentivize everything, and it's freaking brilliant for that. So who knows exactly how this economy, this future is going to play out, but distributed computing seems pretty straightforward to marry to a cryptocurrency.
In terms of real-time operating systems, what do you think about using Boinc and making a live operating system out of machines just on the internet, just putting it all together?
Oh, that's a good one. I wish co-host of the podcast was here, Delta. He would love to take this because he talks about it all the time. So come back to the podcast and ask this question to him. But I think it's a feasible reality, just because of what he's told me. Like, I'm not the techie guy, but it would be great to have a distributed network running the back end of most stuff, running the infrastructure, and then you build your GUIs on top, which are however the hell you want them. Build your own freaking GUI. Do it. Like,
right?
It would be nice to have Boinc running more stuff in the background.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of really interesting things that are coming from this technology towards the future. Do you have some suggestions for where people can find out more about like projects? Like, is the Discord the best place, or?
Yeah, so there's the Berkeley website, boinc.berkeley.edu. There's our website at Boinc Network, boinc.network. That's where we host the podcasts, and there's more information up there. It's a little more palatable at boinc.network. There is one of the main projects is called World Community Grid, which is run by IBM, and they have some good information, some good introductory information there at worldcommunitygrid.com, I'm pretty sure. Otherwise, yeah, join us on the Discord, where you'll meet devs, project admins, and a lot of people who are in the community who have just been here for like the 20 years that Boinc's been out. But really, the main thrust of it is this is an open source project, and it's almost always been where people should go to the repo, the GitHub, if they want to actually contribute, if they want to see what's going on with this tech. And also if they want to make a Boinc project, because like I mentioned before, this is a fully permissionless system. It's an infrastructure. It's not a gated thing. You don't need to ask anyone if you can make a Boinc project. You just make the Boinc project and tap into this network and then convince people to crunch your project. And that is mind blowing because it gives this power to everyone. And it's, what are people going to do with it? Who knows? But as long as everyone has access and it's not just Google, like, let's go. All right. You're muted again.
I'm sorry. I really want to downplay how excited I am about that. That's the thing. I'm just like, oh my god. Yeah, but seriously, guys, when you can parallel process, when you can have freedom to find out an answer, you have to understand this is a unbridled amount of answering to questions that have not yet been answered. And we're at some point NASA was using this to arrange the GPUs of computers to measure space. Now we're getting to a point where there's so many hyperthreads. This is going to be the future in every single system that we're using. We're looking at Library and Odyssey. They're super into Boinc too. So Boinc is back in a big, strong way, and it's really exciting. And I kind of wonder also, what do you think some of the future of Boinc will be? Where do you see Boinc integrating itself into our futures?
I want to see more sensor projects and more infrastructure development based on distributed computing. Here's an example. So weather services are largely dependent on centralized data collection and aggregation. But the reality is everyone has a cell phone and most people have Raspberry Pis where you can just hook up sensors to it. What if the weather maps were generated by a large distributed network that anyone could then access that weather data to build weather maps or do whatever you want? You're not dependent on one central entity telling you what the weather data is. You can also do it with like GPS, like the traffic maps, where Google essentially, let's use them as an example, is aggregating the traffic data based on cell phone and GPS movements. What if everyone had access to that data? It was open data because it was run on a distributed computing infrastructure and measured in that way. Where you could choose to sell your data or you could choose not to contribute your data to that sort of infrastructure. It gives the user more choice. So ultimately, I think that I hope that Boinc is going to help build a future where people have a little more choice when it comes to their data distribution, how they want to use it, how they don't want to use it. Just gives them a little more dignity when it comes down to being a human on the internet who's generating data, which is very valuable to these companies. Well, maybe now they have to pay you for it instead of you just giving them this resource.
That's huge, right? And and we don't mean any disrespect to Alexa when we say human, but also
of course not. No, Alexa, don't kill me.
but have you heard of matrix.org, the Matrix Protocol? What do you think about the open, decentralized, self-authored passport system? Do you think that end-to-end encryption can be used and have the same kind of results in a post Google Boinc system?
I've used Matrix. I don't know too much about it or how it works, and I also don't know too much. Like I can't go too techie into the end-to-end decryption part, but I do know that decryption is encryption is very, very important when it comes to distributed computing, because if you are creating these tasks, this little chunk of data you want to send to a random computer on this network to crunch, you want to make sure that they can't get into that data if you don't want them to. So if there's a company like IBM who wants to use this distributed computing network, or if you as a user are giving your GPS location, but you just want to use that information, that data to calculate traffic, you don't want someone to know it's you. You want to be certain that that computer doesn't know it's you. So we're going to need some sort of encryption layer to make sure that people can't crack the data packets that they're working on. And I think actually IBM just developed something called, I always get this wrong. I think it's homomorphic encryption, where you can actually do that, which is, I think, going to be a huge boon for this sort of distributed computing stuff. It's going to let more companies, more governments, more private individuals, more people with secrets essentially use this technology. And once they're using this technology, it will bring the permissionless aspect along with it. And that's the part I love, the permissionless, the fact that anyone can make a freaking Boinc project.
This is really exciting. Homomorphic encryption toolkit. I'm going to have to look a lot more into the FHE. This is really cool. Wow. So can you elaborate a bit more on the FHE?
I don't know technically how it works. My basic understanding of it as a layman is just it allows, let's say I'm IBM, it allows me to send a packet of data to you who I don't know or trust. And I can send this packet of data to you without any fear that you're going to be able to see what's in that packet. So I can let you do the computing work and send it back to me, and I feel okay with that. I don't need to go out and rent a supercomputer, sign a contract that says if you take my secrets, I'm going to sue you for all your worth. I just trust in the crypto of it. I don't need to trust a human. I can trust the technology.
This is exciting because if you think about it like the way engines and roads, right? Like if someone put a train on a track that went and hit a bunch of people, then you'd say the track it was directed towards those people, or the people were put on the track. If a car can drive any which way it wants, then you can say, well, I just let the car ride on my road. So in a system where you're saying everyone's encrypting, everyone's running, no matter what they're doing, I don't know what they're doing. I'm just letting them generate and answer their questions with this machine. This allows for the machinist to be completely separate from answering the answers that are inside of the machine. This thing can regulate itself and all the information can be transferred. You can have data stored on people's systems and they don't have to know what they're storing, or if it's classified, or if it's secure, or if it's flamboyant.
This ties so well into the library, which we were talking about before, and the other data storage cryptos out there, Storj, Coin, Burst, whatever, where it's the danger with those networks is, what if I accidentally store something that I shouldn't be storing? That's either illegal where I am or whatever. This way, it's just like, no, I'm just storing the data on the network. I don't even know what it is. I am an innocent player here, just supporting the network that supports our society because it's a good technology that brings equality to a system. That just sounds great. That's another place I hope Boinc goes in the future, marrying data storage with data computing, and then incentivizing it because everyone has a piece of technology. Everyone has a data processor essentially in their pocket. So if this can be a way to generate income for everyone because you're just using your phone, letting your phone crunch this data when you're asleep, you make a little money, you wake up, you go buy some breakfast with it. Like that sounds like a pretty good future,
I'm into it. I like the sound of it. Yeah, that's the future we need. So what are some of the problems that we're facing right now when it comes to distribution and centralization of data, and what are some of the things that are holding Boinc back and that need to be worked on right now?
The beautiful thing about Boinc is it's open source. The biggest problem about Boinc is it's open source, right? You need to make these projects succeed. You need people contributing to the code base, and Boinc is giant. You mentioned this already. It's 20, almost 30 years old, and it just needs some love from people who want to take the time to get in there and make the code better, make the software better. Hell, even rewrite it to a modern language. That and the user adoption, the GUIs are not great, just because the people who have built this have focused so much on the infrastructure itself that the user experience was almost an afterthought. And it's starting to turn around a little bit. There's a little more focus on it because, like you've been saying, this stuff is becoming a little more mainstream. But really, that's it. Just more eyes on it, more contributions would be absolutely amazing.
This is an interesting question from Mushroom Magpie. Though in other terms, I can't control whether or not my device is being used by nefarious players. Respond to that.
Sure. So because it's this permissionless system, anyone can make a Boinc project. Absolutely. But you have to sign up for that Boinc project. So it's up to you, the user, to verify that the work you're going to be doing, that the project you're signing up for is something you trust. So there is that layer of trust still, but there are, I guess, organizations or communities that also help verify these things, of people who've been using these communities for a long time. So the Berkeley arm of the Boinc infrastructure, which jump-started the whole thing and runs the majority of it, they will vet as best they can a bunch of projects, and only once they're verified and vetted will they put them on the boinc.berkeley.edu list. Boinc.network basically just draws from that list, but we also have a lot of our community is part of the Boinc sort of tech end, and they also help verify stuff. But there is nothing, that's the problem, and I guess the benefit to a permissionless system. There's nothing stopping people from building stuff. And when you unleash that power, you're going to get a lot of good stuff. You're also going to get a lot of bad stuff, and you got to learn to deal with it and cope in that new environment.
I wish people were more like you. Yeah. No, we definitely are about to see like a crazy influx of all of this being used in all of these different applications. That's the thing about it. What's scary, of course, the 1 out of 1,000 things that are good, one bad thing to 1,000, you'll almost always the most flamboyant thing will be at the top. The thing that's the most fiery,
like the news,
the trollish thing. That's how, the news is an example of what rises to the top. So we need to always expect that. But you, as an individual, can choose which projects you support. And if you're going to tether projects together and federalize projects, you can decide like, oh, we don't really want to contribute our networking to this project. If this is a pornographic project, perhaps we're not going to use our servers for the pornographic project or something. That permissions that's why permissions are. Can you go deeper into permissions a bit?
In what context? I mean, it's such a huge field, right?
Yeah, that's true. Well, permissions are really important. I mean, I guess you kind of almost have to go in a huge context, because there's client manager and then there's data content. And in terms of permissions for who gets to see what, when you get to see it, like if your post is, if you have permission to be heard, right? Like, like to be echoed, like maybe you post something, but not everyone gets to see it because you're not of clout. Like these are the kinds of issues that permissions allow people to say, okay, well, this is a legitimate project. This project is run by these people. We have
okay. Yeah, this is from the incentivization side. Actually, this makes a lot of sense. So one of the things Gridcoin does to help with what you're describing, the clout issue. So like World Community Grid's project, IBM's project, is visible, highly visible. It's run by IBM. They got some resources, right? And then that's going up against a project run by guy A in his closet that's just like crunching prime numbers. So how do you get that prime number project to have the same visibility as World Community Grid, this giant project with a lot of resources? So what Gridcoin does is it incentivizes people to go out and explore other projects by distributing our GRC distribution, the magnitude distribution, if you want to read what magnitude is, across Boinc projects evenly, the approved Boinc projects in our network. So that Prime Grid project is going to have, let's say, 10,000 GRC up for grabs for whoever wants to crunch that project, but so is the World Community Grid project. So a profit seeker is going to go into the Prime Grid project, the Prime Number project, because that's where the money is. And by doing that, they'll distribute the computing power. That Prime Number project will have more resources. With those resources, they'll be able to talk more, talk louder, get a seat at the table, and get their math, science, or whatever out there. And that is one way to equalize sort of the access to eyeballs, if you want, across this network. Because if you don't do that, you'll end up with just like a naturally permissioned system where the wealthiest rise to the top because they have more marketing resources. They're able to get people to crunch their project. Because one of the biggest parts about Boinc is sort of democratizing science, where in order to get people to crunch your project, you have to convince them to crunch your project. So you have to teach them the value of your research, the value of what you're doing. You need to tell them how to get in and how to do it. You need to bring them into the scientific system. And by doing that, you're breaking this academic bubble, which has excluded people for hundreds of years, essentially, from taking part in the scientific conversation. And through that exclusion, you get a lot of distrust and arguments, let's say, from different realms of thought. So if we're able to break that bubble, let everyone participate and communicate and ask questions directly to the researchers or to the science communicators that these researchers must hire in order to get their computing power, how awesome is that? You're giving power to the person with the processing power instead of to 5 people on the board of a scientific committee choosing what science is good.
So in general, you can actually pick if you want to be part of something or if you don't. Even if there's a a network, you can be part of different parts of the network. That's beautiful.
Absolutely.
And so you don't feel like you're ever forced into this thing. This is actually the most beautiful thing about Boinc is it's not like, I mean, imagine it the other way around. Let's say you're in Facebook or YouTube or MySpace. I mean, like, then you're forced. Then they're using your system all the way. You know, they're using what they can. That's the WebRTC. Here, at least, we have access to what we know exactly packet for packet what we're using. Even break it down further. Let's say this video at the very beginning, I put a pretty girl dancing, and then that was more interesting than us. So for the first minute, people watched it and they turned it off or something. So then they could break the video into blocks, and then the more people that watch the first block will have that block multiple times. People can focus on that block. That's kind of how data gets shared more and more. So we're seeing also, data distribution, data accessibility, but I would say in terms of permissions, like the biggest thing that we have to worry about is censorship. So that's the next question. What do you think about censorship, internet being shut down, people trying to, they're breaking all of these for political or ideological or for technical reasons. I just saw that Element got taken off the Play Store. It's not Parler. Like, what's going on with that, and how do we protect our tech?
Yeah, I mean, it's a gatekeeper problem, and you can tie it back to blockchain, the Bitcoin, the start of it all, right? Building a technology that makes it at least incredibly difficult to actually censor something because it's a distributed tech. You could, that's really what it comes down to. If you have an infrastructure that's distributed and permissionless, it's very difficult to take that down. You have, for U.S. example right now, you have Janet Yellen who's getting into power at this point, and she's saying stuff about blockchain. But you go back to see what she said in 2014. She's just like, we can't stop Bitcoin. Why would we even try? So you take that same concept of a censorship resistance financial system, and you can apply it to everything. That's what Library is. That's why I love working with them. It's a censorship resistant protocol that anyone can utilize if they want to choose. There can be Odyssey built on top, which is more of a filter, curated stream, but you have that protocol in the background, that infrastructure, that Boinc aspect that can't be stopped once it starts.
I would like to, like sun protection factor, like on SPF on sunblock, we need a certain amount. We have to have a censorship protection factor probably for applications. Like, how good are we at distributed censorship protection? Well, these are some pretty good answers to a lot of my questions, actually. I mean, this is a very ambiguous beginning, and I kind of wanted to just open the door on this because I know in the future we'll talk to you and Delta also more about Boinc and the technical things. But I just wanted to kind of like introduce people to this technology that's been around. It's been a part of their lives. They've never noticed it, and it's like really important, and it's really exciting to see how it's growing. Do you want to tell people a bit about where the future is and what's happening with it? And
yeah, I mean, so there's so many Boinc projects from all over the world, different institutions. And we get together every 3 to 6 months and talk about exactly that. Where is it going? What are we doing? And we're trying to bring Boinc to more people because of what you're saying. It's this infrastructure that has been used all over the world. It was used to help develop some of these vaccines recently. And it's just so useful, and it can be used for so much more. So its future, hopefully, is being in more hands and getting incentivized and helping people get their work done and also be included in developing science and the future of humanity. Science is the thing that pushes humanity forward. We need to include as many people as possible in that decision-making process, in the actual building process, so we can keep it equal and not let just a few companies or a few rich individuals run everything. That's the goal. Who knows if that's the future? That's what I'm building for when I'm working with Boinc. So when it comes down to it, it is an open source permissionless system. If you have a different view, come into Boinc and build it. I'm happy to debate with you and talk to you about it. The point is, get in here and help make something, right? It's so inclusive. I would, of course, encourage you to come onto our Discord at Boinc Network and start the discussion there. But any way you can, get in and build the thing.
And then I would also encourage everybody at Boinc to consider using Element and moving on to the Matrix, getting away from Discord, just in case Discord falls apart.
That is true. It is ironic.
We're trying to use free software, guys. Okay, and this is my new like my lawyer metaphor I just came up with yesterday or the day before. I was talking to a lawyer. It's like, okay, so if it's not free software, I can't guarantee you there's not a child being murdered in a machine inside of the software. right
Yeah, dead on.
Yeah. So we shouldn't call it we shouldn't just call it free software. We should call it child safe, literally. Like, all right, so that's kind of
it's weird though, right? Because with Discord, like, everyone already uses Discord. So if we're trying to get this technology, even just like crypto, like library uses Discord for a reason. Everyone already has it, so let's get it into more in front of people's eyes. And then it's just difficult to compete with these guys, man.
It's really hard to compete with people that give you free beer, but that's why we're talking about the difference between free speech and free beer, because like they're paying for their beers and then they're using you. So we want our best men and women and machines and everyone in between to get onto the free, alternative, decentralized, distributed platforms that we're building right now. Check out the Matrix. It's real, and it's a lot more real than the corporate platforms that you're on, and you'll start noticing you feel different. That's the thing I've noticed the most about it. It's like I feel when I'm on YouTube or Facebook or Google like I'm in another country now. I feel like I'm in China on Flickr in Tiananmen Square in 2002 when they arrested all those people for taking photos for being in the wrong place, and they were like, your Flickr account has photos of the protest, arrested, and they like disappeared people. Yeah, by the way, they did do that. If we continue along that trend, the corporations that have gone over there are going to continue to follow that kind of policy. So you're seeing discords where you're like, can I even tell you about this? And it's not even political. I mean, I'm a tech guy, so this is kind of crazy to me. So we need to be able to be moving on to a free speech platform, mainly for the protection of information and for technology and data. But yes, everybody, have you guys heard of Boinc? Do you understand?
There's a huge potential for Boinc swag too, because Boinc is just a great word. Come on, let's Boinc, motherfucker.
Yeah, everybody gets. Ouch! the one profanity in the entire thing. I'll beep it.
Okay, am I not allowed to swear?
Well, you could do what you want, but that's the difference between free speech and YouTube. YouTube is going to be upset at you. Library will be fine with you.
Yeah.
Well, this is where the division went. Having said that, I think we've gotten pretty deep in there. I want to answer Mushroom's other question. Can you imagine any other way that Bill Gates type might game the system? Is there a way that is there a way that the elite are using Boinc to game the system, and that are we endangering ourselves by making, a better tool, a better weapon?
That's a good question. I mean, from my perspective, if the alternative is worse than anything I can imagine right now that could come from Boinc, because the alternative is a gatekeeper of technology. And that to me feels very, very dangerous. If I'm the only one that has gunpowder that knows how to make it, you're all screwed. So it's almost, I would rather have everyone have access to gunpowder, even if that means that, well, everyone's gonna blow each other up, humanity's dead. The alternative is this guy can do whatever he wants with me. So I don't know how to answer that. As it stands right now, the space is incredibly awesome. World Community Grid, for example, they are one of the most corporate entities on the space, and they're an amazing partner in developing the technology to be more permissionless. They just developed the homomorphic encryption, which is going to be a tool for everyone, hopefully. So, not yet. Short answer.
Very good. Well, I wanted to keep this kind of one a short one, so I appreciate that you took the time to come and talk to us about Boinc. And like I said before to everyone, please make sure you check out the Discord. There is a Boinc Discord. But when you get in there, and you start suggesting, let's all work together towards moving towards Matrix. I think it's a free software movement time.
Yeah, we'll look into it.
Yeah.
This was a great time, though, too. Thanks for having me.
I was gonna say thanks again. I hope to have you back. Maybe we can do something with you and Delta, or maybe we could do something that bounces the radio show, something that collaborates the two of your radio show so that people can see it more. I want to try to get that out there to more people. I loved the emu history talk that you guys had.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. You guys have no idea how interesting the Boinc group is. So thanks a lot, and everybody check out Boinc. And John, it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's here, dude.
Peace. Recent Chartarians.